When my husband Arthur passed away, I didn't imagine that the real nightmare was just beginning. Looking at the face of my daughter-in-law, Juliet, I understood the meaning of hatred. "From now on, this house is mine," she said with an icy smile as she threw my bags onto the curb. "Can you just go to a nursing home?" I didn't say anything. I just smiled. She didn't know I was keeping a secret that would change everything. The $20 million Arthur had left exclusively for me, along with our beach house in Miami Beach that she didn't even dream existed. But before I continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you are watching us from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. Arthur's coffin slowly descended into the cold earth that rainy September morning. After 38 years of marriage, he left with the same serenity with which he lived, leaving only silence and an emptiness that seemed to fill every atom of my being. We had faced so many storms together, but this one I would have to cross alone. While the last people scattered from the cemetery, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was Michael, our only son. "Mom, let's go home. You need to rest." I nodded silently, unable to turn the whirlwind of emotions consuming me into words. Beside me, Juliet, my daughter-in-law, remained impassive. There wasn't a single tear in her eyes, no sign of mourning on her face, only a calculating look that swept over every person present, as if she were tallying up who might be useful in the future. During the drive back, the silence in the car was only interrupted by the sound of the rain hitting the windshield. Michael drove while Juliet constantly checked her cell phone. Not a single word was exchanged. The house that Arthur and I built together in New York City, the one where we raised our son and planted dreams, now seemed like a strange place, as if all the memories had been swept away along with my husband's soul. When we arrived, I noticed something strange at the garage entrance. My 3 suitcases, the ones I had packed to stay a few days at Michael's house after the burial, were piled at the entrance, exposed to the drizzle that continued to fall. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice choked with exhaustion. Juliet shrugged and gave a cold smile. "I thought you had already figured it out. Now that Arthur is no longer here, things are going to change." Michael looked at the ground, avoiding my gaze. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Son, what does your wife mean by this?" My voice came out almost as a whisper. It's temporary, Mom," he stammered. "Juliet thinks it would be better for you to stay somewhere else." Before I could process what was happening, Juliet stepped forward. Her expensive perfume invaded my nostrils as she approached. "From now on, this house is mine," she declared with a firmness that left me stunned. "You can go to a nursing home. It would be the most convenient thing for all of us." The cruelty of those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Michael, hoping he would defend me, that he would say something, anything. But he remained silent, like a shadow of himself, dominated by that woman I could never truly know. I took a deep breath. There were no tears to shed. The shock gave way to a strange calm, as if a part of me had disconnected from reality. "I understand," I replied simply. I took my bags and carried them to the small utility room in the back of the property, a place Arthur used as a tool shed. The smell of dampness and mold invaded my nostrils. A small makeshift bed had been placed in a corner, next to an old table where a dog bowl rested. The message was clear. I was worth less than a pet to them. I sat on the edge of that hard bed and looked around. The walls stained with moisture, and the small window that barely let in daylight would be my new home. I did not allow the tears to fall, though they threatened to overflow at any moment. Arthur always said that in moments of greatest pain, silence was our best defense. "When they think you are defeated, Helen, that is when you should save your strength," he used to tell me. "The right silence is your most powerful weapon." As the night went on, I remained seated in that damp room, remembering every detail of my life with Arthur. The generous and prudent man who always planned everything, who took care of every detail even for when he was no longer here. What Juliet and Michael didn't know is that Arthur, in his silent wisdom, had protected me. Before his illness worsened, he transferred all our most valuable assets to my name. A beach house in Miami Beach that few knew existed, shares in lucrative companies, an offshore account. In total, approximately $20 million. I looked at the locket around my neck, a gift from Arthur on our last wedding anniversary. Inside it, a small compartment held the key to the safe where all the documents were secured. A faint smile formed on my lips as the rain continued to fall outside. Juliet thought I was just a defenseless, disposable widow. She had no idea who I really was, nor what was about to happen. That night I couldn't sleep. The noise of the rain on the tin roof marked the hours like a relentless metronome. I spent the early morning hours planning every step I would take from then on, not for revenge, but for justice, out of respect for Arthur's memory, and primarily for myself. When the sun rose, I heard Juliet's steps on the floor above. The clinking of cups and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted down to my small room, reminding me that I would soon be summoned for my new duties in the house that was once mine. I got ready as best I could with the few clothes I had in my suitcases. I combed my gray hair and looked at the broken mirror hanging on the wall. At 63 years old, my face bore the marks of a lifetime, but my eyes still shone with silent determination. "The game begins today, Arthur," I whispered into the void, "and you taught me how to play very well." When I went upstairs and entered the kitchen, Juliet was already seated at the table, fiddling with her tablet. She barely looked up when I entered. "Ah, you're here. Breakfast should be served at 7 o'clock sharp." "Michael wants scrambled eggs with bacon, and the kids prefer pancakes." "I just want a fruit salad and a green juice." I didn't respond. I simply put on the apron that was hanging near the stove and started preparing what she had requested. As I cut the fruit, I watched Juliet out of the corner of my eye. She seemed too comfortable in the role of mistress of the house, as if she had rehearsed this moment for years. The children, Dean and Jamie, came down for breakfast still sleepy. Jamie, at 10 years old, hugged me shyly. "Grandma, why are you in the kitchen making food?" Before I could answer, Juliet intervened. "Grandma is going to help us more around the house now. Isn't that great? That way you can see her every day." The girl nodded confusedly, while Dean just shrugged and focused on his cell phone. Michael appeared soon after, dressed for work, avoiding eye contact with me. "Good morning," he said, kissing the children's foreheads and Juliet's lips. I served breakfast in silence, observing every movement, every interaction. No one invited me to sit at the table. I stood near the countertop, like an employee waiting for new orders. "The children need to be ready for school in 20 minutes, Juliet announced, getting up, "and you can start cleaning the house after they leave. Oh, and don't forget to feed the dogs." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Juliet came closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You should be grateful that I allow you to stay here. Many mothers-in-law don't have that luck." When everyone had left, I remained alone in that kitchen, which, until a few days ago, was the heart of my home. I wiped the table, washed the dishes, and meticulously organized everything. Every movement was executed with a calculated calm, as if I were only observing myself from the outside. As I swept the living room floor, my eyes landed on the photograph that still occupied a prominent place on the shelf. Arthur and I, embracing in front of the ocean, the day we bought our beach house in Miami Beach, a property Juliet was completely unaware of. At that moment, I decided that I needed to act intelligently, wait for the right moment, observe every move, every habit, every weakness, and mainly understand what was really happening in that house. Over the following week, I adapted to the new routine. I woke up before everyone else, prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, washed and ironed clothes. Juliet did not miss the opportunity to humiliate me with small comments or unnecessary orders. "Helen, you forgot to clean under the couch." "How careless." "This dish still has a stain. Are you losing your eyesight?" Michael, for his part, seemed increasingly distant. He came home late from work, always with a worried look. I tried to talk to him several times, but he always changed the subject or claimed to be busy. It was on one of those nights, when everyone was already settled in, that I decided to investigate Arthur's study. The place was exactly as he had left it. The books lined up on the shelf, the old leather armchair where he spent hours reading, the solid oak desk we bought together on our 10th wedding anniversary. Carefully, I opened the desk drawer where Arthur kept important documents. It was empty. All the folders, contracts, and papers had disappeared. I felt a chill up my back. Someone had searched everything. I continued my silent search. At the back of the shelf, behind a row of books, I found what I was looking for. The small safe that Arthur installed years ago, known only to the two of us. Using the key I kept in the locket, I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, I found the original documents for all our properties, including the beach house, in addition to the will that Arthur had made, leaving me as the sole beneficiary. There was also an envelope addressed to me in my husband's unmistakable handwriting. My dear Helen, if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer by your side. Forgive me for that. I promised we would be together until the end, but life has its own plans. Throughout all these years, I have watched with concern the changes in our son. The kind man we raised seems to have been lost under Juliet's influence. I fear that, when I leave, they will try to take advantage of you, of your kindness, of your gentleness. That is why I took measures. I transferred everything we built together to your name. Our lawyer, Mr. George Thompson, has all the instructions. Seek him out when you deem it necessary. Do not let them take your dignity, my love. You have always been stronger than you think. With all my love, forever, Arthur. Silent tears streamed down my face as I held the letter to my chest. Arthur always knew. He always protected me, even knowing he wouldn't be here. I carefully put everything back in the safe, except for a copy of the most important documents, which I put in my purse. I returned to my small room in the annex with a new feeling growing inside me. Determination. The next morning, when Juliet handed me an even longer list of household chores than usual, I just smiled and nodded. "Any problem, Helen?" she asked, suspicious of my sudden docility. "None," I replied calmly. "I am just adapting to my new reality." She smiled, satisfied with what she interpreted as submission. Little did she know that, while I cleaned the house and took care of the chores, I was observing every movement, every whispered phone conversation, every document that passed through her hands. I began to notice a pattern. Every Tuesday afternoon, Juliet would leave saying she was going to the hair salon, but would return with no apparent change. On Thursdays, Michael would stay late in the study, claiming extra work. And both seemed worried about money, despite the luxurious lifestyle they maintained. One night, while serving dinner, I overheard Juliet commenting to Michael, "We need to resolve that issue with the land in Florida. The buyer is impatient." Michael seemed tense. "We can't sell something that isn't legally ours." Juliet lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "Your father is dead. Who is going to contest it?" I pretended not to have heard, but my heart raced. They were planning to sell properties that now belonged to me, without my knowledge or consent. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I made a call from my old cell phone, which Juliet considered too useless to bother checking. "Mr. George? This is Helen, Arthur Silva's wife. We need to talk urgently." Mr. George Thompson's office was exactly as I remembered it. Shelves full of legal books, the smell of fresh coffee, and that aura of discretion that always made me feel safe. At 72 years old, the lawyer still maintained the same elegant posture and the sharp gaze that inspired confidence. "Mrs. Helen, my deepest condolences for Arthur," he said, holding my hands in his. "A loyal friend, an honorable man, an irreparable loss." I sat on the leather armchair across from his desk, my hands trembling slightly as I opened my purse to take out the documents I had found. "George, I need to understand exactly what my current situation is," I said, trying to keep my voice firm, "and I need your total discretion." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and examined every paper I put in front of him. His face remained impassive, but I noticed the slight frown on his forehead as he read. "Arthur was extremely meticulous, as always," he commented after a few minutes. "He transferred all the main assets to your name before his condition worsened. The house where you live, the property in Miami Beach, the financial investments, everything is legally in your name." "And what about the rest?" I asked, remembering Juliet's mentions of land. "There are some properties that remained in Arthur's name, but his will is clear. You are the universal beneficiary." He took a folder from his drawer. "Here is a copy of the will, already registered with the notary. No one can contest it." A momentary relief washed over me, but it was soon replaced by a new worry. What if they try to sell something without my consent? George took off his glasses and looked me directly in the eyes. Helen, if they try to carry out any transaction with properties that are legally in your name, they will be committing a crime. Forgery, fraud. He paused. Is there any evidence that they are planning something like that? I told him about the conversation I had overheard and my current situation in the house. The lawyer's eyes hardened. What they are doing to you is inadmissible. We could initiate legal action immediately to... I raised my hand, gently interrupting him. Not yet, George. I want to fully understand what is happening before taking any action. What do you plan to do then? He asked, intrigued. Observe, document, and when the time is right, act. I took a deep breath. But I need your help with a few things. I left the office 2 hours later with a well-outlined plan and a feeling of empowerment that I hadn't felt in weeks. George had helped me understand exactly my rights and the measures we could take when necessary. Before returning home, I stopped at a small electronics store where I bought 2 discrete recording devices and a tiny camera that could be easily hidden. I was not proud to have to resort to such methods, but I needed concrete proof to protect myself. When I returned, I found the house empty, except for Jamie, who was sitting on the porch reading a book. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Grandma, where were you? Mom got angry when she didn't find you to prepare lunch." I sat beside her, touching her dark hair so similar to Arthur's when he was young. "I had to sort out some things, dear, adult things." Jamie lowered her voice, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Mom said you're leaving soon for a special place for old people. Is that true, Grandma?" I felt my heart clench. "And what do you think about that, Jamie?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to leave. I already lost Grandpa." I hugged her tightly, feeling her little head rest on my shoulder. "Don't worry, dear. I'm not going anywhere." Later, when Juliet returned with Dean, she barely contained her irritation at seeing me. "Where were you?" "I had to order takeout because you weren't here to prepare lunch." "I went to the doctor," I lied naturally. "I have that routine checkup every month, remember?" Juliet frowned, but didn't question further. She probably didn't even bother to remember my medical appointments. "Well, now that you're here, you can serve dinner at 7 o'clock tonight. Michael is bringing an important guest. In the evening, I prepared an elaborate dinner, like in the old days when Arthur and I hosted friends. Michael's guest was a middle-aged man named Richard Mendez, who introduced himself as a real estate broker. Throughout the meal, I noticed meaningful glances exchanged between him, Michael, and Juliet. "So, Michael," Richard commented as he savored the dessert I had prepared, "is that land in Florida still available?" Michael shot a nervous glance in my direction before answering. "We are finalizing some details. Everything will be resolved soon." After the guest left, I waited for everyone to fall asleep to put my plan into action. Carefully, I placed one of the recording devices in the living room and the other in the study, where Juliet and Michael usually had their most private conversations. The next morning, as I prepared coffee, I noticed Juliet on the phone, speaking quietly on the porch. "Yes, the land in Florida." "No, she doesn't know anything. It's only a matter of time until we sort out the documentation." My heart raced. The land in Florida was an investment Arthur had made years ago. According to the documents I found, it had been transferred to my name shortly before his illness worsened. In the following days, I continued my apparently submissive routine while gathering information through the recordings and accidentally overheard conversations. The picture that was forming was alarming. Juliet and Michael were planning to sell several properties that now belonged to me, forging documents with the help of Richard, who was clearly not just a broker, but an accomplice in this scheme. One afternoon, while cleaning the couple's room, a task Juliet insisted on assigning me, probably to remind me that the space that was once mine now belonged to her, I found something that confirmed my suspicions: a folder containing forged copies of asset transfer documents with my falsified signature. With trembling hands, I photographed everything with my cell phone and immediately sent the images to George. His response was quick. "This is evidence of a crime. We can act now." Not yet, I replied. I want to see how far they will go. The opportunity to discover more came in the form of a dinner Juliet organized at home. Among the guests were Richard and his wife, in addition to a man who was introduced as Charles Viana, a potential buyer of a family investment. During dinner, I served the dishes and discreetly observed the interactions. Charles seemed like a successful businessman, one of those who doesn't ask many questions when a deal seems too advantageous. "So, Michael, when can we finalize the transaction for the land in Florida?" he asked while I served the wine. "My investors are anxious," Juliet intervened with her most charming smile. "We're just waiting for some final signatures. You know how bureaucracy is." When I went back to the kitchen to get the dessert, I overheard Juliet whispering to Michael, "He's offering $5 million. We need to close this before the old lady realizes anything." That night I couldn't sleep. The confirmation of their criminal intentions was there, recorded in audio and witnessed by me. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. To what extent was Michael involved? Was he an active perpetrator or just manipulated by Juliet? The next morning, I decided to take a risk. While Juliet was in the shower, I gently knocked on the door of the study where Michael was working on his laptop. "Son, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Michael looked surprised and a little uncomfortable. "Now is not a good time, Mom. I'm busy." "It's about the land in Florida," I said directly, watching his reaction. His face instantly paled. What? What land?" "The land you and Juliet are planning to sell to Charles Viana." Michael abruptly stood up, looking toward the door to make sure no one was listening. "How do you know? You shouldn't know about that." "I know a lot more than you imagine, son," I replied calmly. "I know about the forged documents, about the plans to sell properties that don't belong to you." He ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking aged and defeated. "Mom, you don't understand. We have serious financial problems. Juliet, she has debts you can't imagine. And the solution is to commit crimes, forge my signature, treat me like a burden to be discarded in a nursing home?" He didn't answer. He just sank into the chair, avoiding my gaze. "Michael, look at me," I pleaded, feeling a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "Your father raised you better than this." "He always made everything easy for you," Michael muttered, a trace of resentment in his voice. "He left everything to you, without thinking about me, about my children." "Is that what Juliet told you?" I asked, surprised by his distorted perception. "Michael, your father secured your future in other ways. The fund for the children's education, the startup capital for your company. He only wanted to protect me, knowing I would be alone. Juliet says you are too old to manage so much money, that it will eventually end up in our hands anyway." The coldness of that statement hit me like a knife. So that was it. They were just waiting for me to die, or perhaps accelerating the process by forcing me to live in deplorable conditions. Before I could answer, we heard Juliet's steps approaching the study. I quickly changed my expression and my tone of voice. "So, son, think about what we talked about regarding that pudding recipe. Your kids will love it," I said with a forced smile as Juliet entered. She looked at us suspiciously. "What are you two whispering about?" "My mother was just asking me to buy some ingredients for a dessert she wants to make for the kids," Michael replied quickly. Juliet smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "How sweet of you. But you don't have time to go shopping now, Michael. We have that meeting with Richard in an hour." When I left the study, I felt Juliet's gaze piercing my back. She knew something was happening, and that made her even more dangerous. That afternoon, while everyone was out, I made a call to George. I explained the conversation I had with Michael and the confirmations I obtained about their intentions. "Helen, we now have enough evidence to take legal action," the lawyer affirmed. "We can request a court order to prevent any transaction with your properties and initiate criminal proceedings against Juliet and anyone else involved in this scheme." "And what about Michael?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your son is implicated, Helen. Even if he is only an accessory by omission, he will have to answer for his actions." The idea of seeing my son face legal consequences for his mistakes broke my heart. Despite everything, he was still my son, the boy I cradled in my arms, whom I taught to take his first steps. "I need more time, George. I want to give Michael a chance to do the right thing. Time is running out, Helen. According to what you told me, they are about to finalize the sale of the land in Florida. Just a few more days, I insisted. I have a plan. After hanging up, I sat on the small bed in the annex, contemplating my next move. I couldn't postpone it any longer. It was time to confront not only Michael, but also Juliet with all the evidence I had collected. The next morning, I found an opportunity when Juliet went to the hair salon and the children were at school. Michael was alone in the study, working on some documents that he quickly hid when I entered. "We need to talk, son." "No interruptions, no excuses." He sighed, looking resigned. "What do you want, Mom?" I placed an envelope on the table containing copies of all the legitimate property documents, along with photos of the forged documents I found. "I want you to see what you're about to do," I said calmly, "and I want you to understand the consequences." Michael examined the papers, his face growing paler and paler. This is serious," he murmured, running his fingers over the documents. "How did you get all this?" "Arthur taught me to always be prepared," I replied simply. "Michael, what you are doing is not just morally wrong, it is a crime, forgery, attempted fraud, misappropriation." "It was Juliet's idea," he shot back like a child trying to avoid blame. "She said it was just a matter of anticipating the inheritance, that you didn't need all that money at your age. And you agreed to send me to a nursing home and treat me like an employee in my own home?" He lowered his eyes, unable to face my gaze. "The debts, Mom. Juliet, she has debts you can't imagine. When I found out, it was too late. The bank is threatening to take our house, the car. And the solution was to try to steal from your own mother?" I asked, feeling a deep pain in my chest. A heavy silence settled between us. Outside, the afternoon sun began to set, casting a golden light through the study window, the same study where Arthur spent hours planning our future, guaranteeing our security. "What are you going to do now?" Michael finally asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Are you going to report us to the police?" "That depends on you," I replied firmly. "I have two conditions. First, you immediately cancel any negotiation for the sale of the properties. Second, Juliet needs to know the game is over. She's never going to accept that. Then you'll have to choose, Michael, your wife or your freedom." At that moment, we heard the sound of the front door opening. Juliet had returned. Michael quickly collected the documents and hid them in the drawer. "Think about it, son," I said quietly before leaving the study. "I want your answer tomorrow." That night was the longest in recent weeks. Lying on the hard bed in the annex, I heard the sounds of the big house, altered voices coming from Michael and Juliet's room, doors slamming, hurried footsteps in the hallway. The storm was just beginning. In the morning, Juliet came down for breakfast with red eyes and a tense face. She completely ignored my presence as she poured herself coffee. Michael appeared minutes later, equally distraught. The children, sensing the tension, ate in unusual silence. "Kids, finish up quickly." "I don't want you to be late for school," Juliet ordered, her voice rougher than usual. As soon as Jamie and Dean left, Juliet turned to me, her eyes blazing with anger. "What are you plotting, you interfering old woman?" I remained calm, carefully placing my teacup on the table. "Just protecting what is mine, Juliet." "Michael told me about your conversation," she continued, approaching threateningly. "Do you think you can blackmail us? That you can destroy our family?" "The only person destroying this family is you, Juliet," I replied without raising my voice. "With your lies, your debts, your greed." She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Look at you, an old woman who can barely climb a flight of stairs. What are you going to do with all that money? With properties you can't even manage?" "That is exactly the point, Juliet. It's my money. They are my properties. I decide what to do with them." She hit the table with her hand, making the crockery clink. "You are being selfish. You only think about yourself, while we could use that money to give a better future to your grandchildren. Don't use the children as an excuse for your greed," I refuted, standing up to face her. "Arthur secured their future with a generous education fund that you probably don't even know exists." This seemed to catch her off guard. Michael, who had been silently watching the confrontation, finally intervened. "Mom, we can't continue like this. We need to find a solution." "The solution is simple," I replied, looking directly at Juliet. "You cancel all illegal negotiations, return all forged documents, and we talk like adults about how to resolve the debt situation." Juliet let out a bitter laugh. "And why would I do that? Why would I give up millions only because an old woman decided she wants to keep everything?" I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and showed her the screen. "Because I have recordings of all your conversations about document forgery, about plans to send me to a nursing home against my will, about defrauding buyers." I paused, watching her expression change from mockery to shock. "And because I already sent copies of everything to my lawyer, with instructions to hand them over to the police in case anything happens to me." Juliet's face lost all color. For a moment, I thought she was going to faint or attack me. Instead, she turned to Michael, her eyes full of fury. "You knew about this? You knew she was spying on us?" Michael seemed equally stunned. "No, I had no idea." Juliet turned back to me, her voice trembling with rage. "This is not over. You won't get away with this." "It is over, Juliet," I replied calmly. "The choice is yours now. We can resolve this as a family or through the court system." She grabbed her purse and left the room tempestuously, slamming the door hard enough to shake the windows. Michael remained motionless, as if trying to process everything that had happened. "Do you really have all that evidence?" he finally asked. I nodded. "Every word, every plan, every document. Your father taught me to always be 2 steps ahead." Michael sank into the chair, covering his face with his hands. "My God, what have I done? How did I let things get to this point?" I approached him and for the first time in weeks put my hand on his shoulder. "There's still time to fix things, son, but you have to make a decision." He looked at me, his eyes red. "What should I do?" "First, cancel the sale of the land in Florida. Then we need to talk honestly about your financial situation." I paused. "And about the future of this family." Michael nodded slowly. "I'm going to call Richard right now and cancel everything." "Excellent. Juliet, she won't accept this easily," he interrupted worriedly. "You don't know Juliet like I do. She might do something impulsive, dangerous. That's why I have a plan B," I replied, "and it's time to put it into practice." The next morning brought a strange sense of calm before the storm. Juliet hadn't returned home the night before. Michael said she was staying at a friend's house to cool off, but the tension in his voice revealed that the situation was more complicated. The children, sensing the heavy atmosphere, asked questions that neither of us was prepared to answer. "Where's Mom?" Jamie asked during breakfast, her big eyes fixed on Michael. "She had to sort out some problems, dear," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "She'll be back soon." Dean, always more perceptive than his sister, frowned. "Did you fight again?" Michael's silence was answer enough. After the children left for school, I sat with my son on the porch. The day was surprisingly beautiful, with the sky an intense blue that contrasted with the darkness looming over our lives. "I called Richard and canceled everything," Michael reported, nervously turning his coffee cup in his hands. "He wasn't happy at all. He threatened to take legal action." "Let him threaten," I replied calmly. "He is just as implicated as you are. More, in fact, since he is the responsible broker." Michael sighed deeply. "What do we do now, Mom?" "Now we have to be honest with each other. I want to know exactly the extent of your debts." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of Arthur that my heart clenched. "It's worse than I imagined. Juliet has 3 credit cards maxed out, loans with loan sharks." As he detailed the situation, the picture that formed was alarming. Juliet had created a web of debts so extensive that not even the sale of the land in Florida would be enough to cover everything. And the worst part, some of that money had been spent on luxury purchases, secret trips, and even an extramarital affair with a tennis instructor. When Michael finished his story, he had tears in his eyes. "I was so stupid, Mom, so blind." How did I not notice what was happening right under my nose? I touched his hand gently. "Sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see, son." At that moment, we heard the sound of a car parking abruptly. Juliet had returned and did not seem to be alone. Michael quickly stood up, his face revealing a mixture of apprehension and resignation. "Stay here," he said, before entering the house to greet her. From the porch, I heard raised voices coming from the living room. Juliet was screaming something about betrayal, while a male voice I didn't recognize tried to calm her down. I decided it was time to make my presence known. When I entered the living room, I found Juliet accompanied by a tall, corpulent man who, by the way he carried himself, was clearly not just a friend. "Ah, look who decided to show up!" Juliet exclaimed when she saw me, her tone heavy with sarcasm. "The manipulative matriarch." The man beside her assessed me with a look that sent a chill down my spine. There was something predatory in his eyes. "Who are you?" I asked directly. "This is Robert," Juliet replied before he could speak. "My lawyer." Michael looked as surprised as I did. "Lawyer? Since when do you have a lawyer?" "Since your little mother decided to threaten us," Juliet retorted, throwing herself onto the sofa with studied theatricality. "Robert will help us ensure we receive what is rightfully ours." Robert stepped forward, showing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Helen, I believe there has been a misunderstanding here. You are of advanced age, possibly with compromised mental faculties." "My mental faculties are perfectly intact," I interrupted, keeping my voice firm, "as is my memory and my understanding of what is right and wrong, legal and illegal." He continued, unperturbed. "As I was saying, considering your age and condition, it would be wiser to allow your son and daughter-in-law to manage your assets. I can prepare an interdiction document that—" "Interdiction?" Michael exclaimed, horrified. "Juliet, have you lost your mind? My mother does not need to be incapacitated." Juliet stood up, facing him. "And what do you suggest, Michael? That we let her ruin our lives? That we lose everything because of her selfishness?" "The only selfishness here is yours," I refuted, remaining calm. "And as for you, Mr. Robert, I suggest you investigate your clients better before proposing actions that could constitute crimes." Robert narrowed his eyes. "Are you threatening me, madam?" "I'm just informing," I replied, pulling my cell phone out of my pocket. "Just as I informed my own lawyer, Mr. George Thompson, about everything that has been happening in this house, including attempts at document forgery, plans to send me to a nursing home against my will, and now this absurd proposal of interdiction." The name of George Thompson caused a visible reaction in Robert. Mr. George was known for his unwavering integrity and influence in legal circles. His confident smile faltered. "This is a bluff," Juliet intervened, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. "Do you want to risk it?" I asked, looking directly at Robert. "Mr. George is just waiting for my signal to send all the documentation to the district attorney's office." A tense silence settled in the room. Robert seemed to be recalculating his strategy, while Juliet alternated between expressions of fury and desperation. Michael remained by my side, his posture firm for the first time in weeks. "Perhaps it would be better if we discuss this more calmly," Robert finally said, adjusting his tie. "Juliet, can we talk privately?" They retreated to the kitchen, leaving me alone with Michael. He looked exhausted, as if he had aged years in just a few days. "Thank you," he murmured, "for not letting me sink completely." Before I could answer, Juliet returned alone, her face a rigid mask of control. "Robert thinks it's better to reconsider our approach," she announced, every word pronounced with effort. "Apparently his contacts are more influential than we imagined." "It's not about influence, Juliet," I replied. "It's about legality." She nodded mechanically, avoiding looking directly at me or Michael. "Okay, so, what do you propose?" "First, I would like you to leave this house," I declared with firmness. "Michael and the children can stay, but you have to go." "What?" she exclaimed, incredulous. "You can't kick me out." "I can and I will. This house is in my name, Juliet." "You treated me like an intruder. You relegated me to a servant's room. You humiliated me daily. Now it's your turn to feel what it's like to have nowhere to go." Michael intervened, visibly uncomfortable. "Mom, maybe this is too drastic." "It is not negotiable, Michael," I asserted, looking him in the eyes. "If you want to go with her, that is your choice. but I have conditions for helping you with the debts, and the first of them is that Juliet no longer lives under this roof." Juliet let out a bitter laugh. "So this is your revenge?" "It's not revenge, Juliet. It's consequence. You chose this path when you decided to treat me like garbage in my own house, when you planned to steal what legally belongs to me, when you lied, manipulated, and betrayed." She looked at Michael, expecting him to defend her, to take her side, but he just lowered his head, defeated. The reality of Juliet's actions had finally completely caught up with him. "You have until the end of the day to pack your things," I concluded. "And tomorrow we will discuss how we are going to resolve the debt situation. I am willing to help, but on my terms." Juliet grabbed her purse with abrupt movements. "This is not over," she hissed before leaving the room, stomping up the stairs tempestuously. When we were alone, Michael looked at me with an expression that mixed gratitude and shame. "Forgive me for everything, Mom. For letting things get to this point. The important thing is that you finally opened your eyes," I replied, feeling a deep fatigue after the confrontation. "We can fix the rest with time." That night, while Juliet packed her things upstairs, I could hear her dragging suitcases and slamming doors. I returned to my small room in the annex. It was the last night I would spend there. Tomorrow I would return to the main room, the space I shared with Arthur for so many years. Sitting on the edge of the hard bed, I looked at the locket I still wore around my neck. I opened it and contemplated the small photo of Arthur stored inside. His serene smile, his kind eyes. "You were right all along," I whispered to the image. "About Juliet, about protecting what we built together. Thank you for not leaving me helpless." A solitary tear rolled down my face. It was not a tear of sadness, but of relief. The worst was over. The storm was beginning to dissipate, and I was still standing. The sunrise brought a strange quietness to the house. Juliet had left in the early morning, taking only 2 suitcases and leaving behind a letter for the children that Michael decided not to show them yet. "First we need to know what to say, how to explain," he argued, his face marked by a sleepless night. While we prepared breakfast together, the first time in weeks that I didn't feel like an employee, Michael seemed like a different man. Older, certainly, but also more focused, as if Juliet's removal had lifted an invisible weight from his shoulders. "How are we going to tell the children?" I asked, beating the eggs for an omelet. Michael sighed, running his hand over his tired face. "The truth, I think, or at least part of it, that their mom and I are separating, that she had to leave for a while." I nodded. "The children perceive more than we imagine. They probably already know that something was very wrong." When Dean and Jamie came down for breakfast, the impact of Juliet's absence was immediate. Jamie looked around confused. "Where's Mom?" Michael sat down, pulling his daughter onto his lap. "Your mom had to leave for a while, Princess. She and I decided we need some time apart." Jamie opened her eyes wide, starting to cry silently. Dean, on the other hand, remained impassive, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. "Is she coming back?" Jamie asked between sobs. Michael hesitated, looking at me for support. "We don't know yet, dear. But what matters is that I am here, Grandma is here, and we are going to take care of you with all our love." Dean finally spoke, his voice surprisingly mature for a 12-year-old. "She was yelling last night. She said that she was going to take us away from here." Michael paled. "You heard that?" Dean nodded. "She came into our room late at night, woke up Jamie, and said she would come back for us, that she wouldn't let us stay with Grandma." A shiver ran down my spine. Juliet was unpredictable, and that threat could not be ignored. Michael seemed to have reached the same conclusion. "I'm going to call the school and let them know that no one other than me or Grandma is authorized to pick them up," he declared, hugging his children tightly. "And I'll talk to Mr. George about a protective order." After the children left for school, Michael made sure to walk them to the classroom door. We met with George at his office. The lawyer listened attentively as we recounted the latest events, including Juliet's threat. "This is serious," he commented, adjusting his glasses. "Based on the evidence you collected, Helen, and Michael's admission about the fraudulent activities, we have enough grounds to request not only a protective order for you, but also a restraining order preventing Juliet from approaching the children without judicial supervision. Michael seemed devastated, but nodded in agreement. I never thought it would come to this, but I need to protect my children. And what about the debts? I asked, returning to the practical aspect of the situation. Michael told me that the situation is quite serious. George opened a folder on his desk. We did a preliminary assessment. The total amount is approximately $1.2 million, distributed among credit cards, bank loans, and less conventional sources. Michael shrunk in his chair. Loan sharks, he clarified in a low voice. Juliet resorted to loan sharks. That complicates things, George admitted. Those people usually do not follow legal channels for collection. I am willing to help pay those debts, I declared, but with some conditions. Michael looked at me surprised. After everything we did, you still want to help? You are my son, Michael, and those children are my grandchildren. I am not going to abandon them. I turned to George. I want to establish a formal agreement. I will pay the legitimate debts, but Michael will need to go through financial counseling, and I want legal guarantees that they will never again attempt to appropriate my properties. We can draw that up, George agreed, taking notes. I also suggest formally transferring the house to your name in the property register to avoid any future confusion. And the beach house? Michael asked, hesitant. Juliet mentioned something about that, but I never fully understood. Your father bought that property as our retirement retreat, I explained. It is a special place for me, Michael. One day, perhaps we can go there together, you, the children, and I. But for now, I need it to be just my space. He nodded, understanding. I understand, Mom, and I respect that. We spent the next few hours outlining the agreement and initiating the legal processes for the protective order. When we returned home at the end of the afternoon, we felt a strange presence as soon as we opened the door. The house had been ransacked, drawers open, cabinets searched, objects scattered on the floor. The immediate panic was for Dean and Jamie, but a quick call to the school confirmed they were still there, participating in extracurricular activities. Juliet? Michael murmured, looking around in disbelief. She must have a spare key. I ran to the study, fearing the worst. The small safe behind the books was intact, but the desk drawer where Arthur kept less important documents had been forced. Several folders were scattered on the floor. What could she be looking for? I asked, more to myself than to Michael. Maybe something she could use against us, some proof that you are not mentally competent, he suggested, helping me gather the papers. Among the scattered documents, I noticed the absence of something important. The original purchase contract for the beach house in Miami Beach. Although I had a copy in the safe, the original document contained details that Juliet could use in some way. We need to change the locks immediately, I declared, and install a security system. Michael was already on the phone, hiring a locksmith and a security company. They will be here in an hour, he informed after hanging up, and I'm going to pick up the children from school right now. The feeling of violation was profound. This house, which was always my sanctuary, now seemed vulnerable, exposed. I sat in Arthur's chair, trying to control the trembling in my hands. Don't let it get to you, I whispered to myself. Not now, not after everything you've faced. When Michael returned with the children, their faces reflected confusion at seeing the state of the house and the technicians installing security cameras and changing locks. What happened here? Dean asked, looking around with wide eyes. We had a little problem, Michael replied with studied calm, but we are sorting everything out. Jamie ran to me, hugging me tightly. It was Mom, wasn't it? She did something bad. The girl's perception surprised me. Why do you think that, dear? Because she was very angry last night. She said she was going to get back what was hers, that you had stolen something important. I exchanged a worried look with Michael. Juliet was creating a dangerous narrative, perhaps even poisoning the children against me. Jamie, your grandmother didn't steal anything, Michael affirmed firmly. In fact, this house was always hers and Grandpa's. We were just confused about that. The girl nodded, still clinging to me. I knew it. Mom was lying again. Again? I asked gently. She lies all the time, Jamie explained with the devastating simplicity of children. She says she's going to take us on a trip, but she never does. She promises gifts that never arrive. She says she loves us, but she yells a lot. My heart ached. The children had been silent witnesses to much more than we imagined. That night, after Dean and Jamie went to bed, Michael and I sat on the porch. The new security lights illuminated the garden, creating dancing shadows over the plants that Arthur cultivated with such care. "I never thought it would come to this," Michael confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "A security system to protect us from my own wife." "Sometimes people are not who we think they are," I replied, watching the stars begin to dot the night sky. "Your father used to say that a person's true character is revealed in adversity." "And my character?" Michael asked, looking at me with eyes full of guilt. "What did it reveal?" "That you still have a lot to learn, son. But also that you have the courage to recognize your mistakes and try to correct them." He smiled weakly. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom." "A mother never gives up," I replied, gently touching his hand, "even when the path seems impossible." That night I slept in the main room for the first time since Arthur's death. His scent still floated subtly in the air, in the pillows, in the curtains. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in weeks. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was back in the place that belonged to me. I woke up startled by the sound of the phone ringing. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 3:17 a.m. "Hello?" I answered, my voice hoarse with sleep. "Mrs. Helen?" The voice on the other end was deep, professional. "This is Commander Oliver from the Judicial Police. We have a situation that requires your presence immediately." My heart pounded. What happened? My son? My grandchildren? "No, ma'am. It's about your daughter-in-law, Juliet Silva. She was arrested attempting to break into your property in Miami Beach." The cold light of the police station contrasted with the still dark sky when I arrived, accompanied by Michael. We had left the children in the care of a trusted neighbor, promising to return as quickly as possible. The drive to the station was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Commander Oliver greeted us with a serious expression. He was a middle-aged man, with tired eyes that revealed a career spent witnessing the worst of humanity. "Mrs. Helen, Mr. Michael, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, leading us to his office. "We have a delicate situation on our hands." "How did Juliet get to Miami Beach?" I asked, still trying to process the information. "Apparently, she took a flight yesterday afternoon," the commander explained, consulting his notes. "A neighbor of the property in the historic district called the police around 1 o'clock in the morning when he noticed someone trying to force entry. When our officers arrived, they found Mrs. Juliet Silva inside the house, searching cabinets and drawers." Michael covered his face with his hands. "My God, was she looking for something specific?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. According to what she stated, she was looking for documents that would prove the property belongs to her husband and not to you, ma'am. The commander raised an eyebrow. "Obviously, we checked the property register and confirmed that the house has been in your name for more than 5 years. Is she being charged with breaking and entering?" Michael asked, his voice trembling. "Yes, and also property damage. She broke a window to get in." I felt a chill. "Was she armed? Was there anyone else with her?" "No, ma'am. She was alone and was not carrying weapons, just tools for the break-in." He paused. "However, we found something worrying in the car she rented." The commander took a set of forged documents from a folder. Deeds, powers of attorney, contracts, all with signatures that were supposedly mine but were obviously fake. "She was planning to sell the property," I concluded, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. Even after everything that happened, she was still trying to... "She mentioned a buyer already interested," the commander confirmed. "A foreign investor willing to pay in cash without many questions." Michael was pale, as if every new revelation were a physical blow. "Can I see her?" The commander hesitated. "We don't usually allow it, but considering the circumstances," he sighed. 5 minutes, and an officer will be present the entire time." As Michael followed a uniformed police officer toward the detention area, Commander Oliver directed his attention to me. "Mrs. Helen, I must inform you that Mrs. Juliet made some serious allegations against you. She claims that you are mentally incapacitated and that you manipulated your son against her." I smiled sadly. "I can imagine." "We are not giving credit to those claims," he assured me, "especially considering the evidence of forgery and invasion, but I thought you should know." I thanked him with a nod. "What happens now? Will she remain detained until the bail hearing?" "Probably tomorrow. Then the judge will decide whether she will respond while free or not." The idea of Juliet in a prison cell was disturbing, despite everything, not out of compassion for her, but for my grandchildren, who would have to deal with that reality. "If I chose not to proceed with the charges," the commander looked at me with seriousness, "it is your right. But considering the evidence of a larger scheme of fraud and forgery, the district attorney's office will probably proceed anyway." When Michael returned, his eyes were red. Without saying a word, we left the police station for the fresh air of the early morning. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon, announcing a new day. "How was she?" I asked as we walked toward the car. "Unrecognizable," he replied softly. "Not physically, but it was like looking at a stranger. She didn't even show remorse. She said I betrayed her, that I chose your money over our marriage. I'm sorry it came to this point, son." He took a deep breath, running his hand through his messy hair. "You know what the worst part is? A part of me still cares about her. I still remember what she was like at the beginning, before all this." The drive back home was in reflective silence. When we arrived, the sun had already fully risen, bathing our house with a golden light that was almost ironic considering the circumstances. The children were still sleeping when we entered. The neighbor, Mrs. Carmen, was in the kitchen preparing coffee. "Is everything okay with you two?" she asked, worry evident on her kind face. "The children slept peacefully. They didn't even realize you left." We thanked her for her help, and Michael walked her to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, contemplating the cup of coffee Mrs. Carmen had served me. The normalcy of the scene, the aroma of coffee, the morning light entering through the window, the ticking of the clock on the wall, contrasted brutally with the chaos our family was facing. Michael returned and sat across from me, rubbing his tired eyes. "What are we going to tell the children?" he asked. It was the million-dollar question. How to explain to the children that their mother was detained for trying to steal from their grandmother? How to soften that truth without completely lying? "The truth, but in a way they can understand," I finally replied. "That their mom did something wrong and needs to face the consequences. That doesn't mean she doesn't love them, but sometimes adults make errors graves." Michael nodded slowly. "And what about us? What about our future?" "One day at a time, son. First, we will ensure that you and the children are well, emotionally and financially. Then we will rebuild what is possible." That morning, when Jamie and Dean came down for breakfast, their sleepy faces lit up when they saw us. It didn't matter what had happened. They were still children, resilient, hopeful, capable of finding joy even in the most difficult circumstances. During breakfast, Michael found the courage to start the difficult conversation. "Kids, we need to talk about something important," he said, choosing carefully his words. "Mom, she did some incorrect things, and now she is with the police." Jamie's eyes opened wide. "Mom is a criminal?" "No, dear," Michael replied quickly. "She just took some very bad decisions that hurt other people." Dean, always more perceptive, looked directly at me. "She tried to hurt Grandma, didn't she?" His intuition surprised me. "She tried to take things that did not belong to her, Dean. And that is wrong no matter who does it." "When is she coming home?" Jamie asked, her little voice trembling. Michael hesitated. "We don't know yet, Princess. It can take some time. But what matters is that I am here, Grandma is here, and we are going to take care of you with all our love." The days following were a mix of legal procedures and emotional adjustments. Juliet ended up being released after the bail hearing, but with severe restrictive measures: prohibition from approaching me, the house, or the children without judicial supervision, in addition to having to wear an electronic bracelet. Michael initiated the divorce process, a decision that, although painful, brought a sense of finality that we all needed. With the help of Mr. George, we began to unravel the complex web of debts left by Juliet and to create a plan to resolve them without compromising the children's future. A week after Juliet's arrest, I decided I needed some time for myself to process everything that had happened and rediscover my own inner peace. "I'm going to go to the beach house for a few weeks," I announced during dinner. "Are you sure you want to go alone, Mom?" Michael asked, worried. I smiled, gently touching his hand. "Yes, this is a special place for me, where your father and I plan to spend our old age together. I need to reconnect with those memories, with that part of me that was forgotten in recent months." Jamie, who had become extremely protective of me, frowned. "But what if Mom tries to go there again?" "Don't worry, dear. The house has a security system now, and the neighbors are alerted. Besides," I added, winking at her, "your grandmother is much craftier than she seems." The morning of my departure, the children gave me drawings to decorate the beach house. Dean had drawn a ship sailing on a vibrant blue sea, while Jamie created a portrait of our family, Michael, Dean, her, and me, holding hands under a smiling sun. "So you don't feel alone," she explained, hugging me tightly. Michael walked me to the car, helping with the bags. Before saying goodbye, I held his face in my hands, as I did when he was just a child. "I am proud of you, son. The way you are dealing with all this, how you are taking care of the children." His eyes moistened. "I learned from the best, Mom. You and Dad." The trip to Miami Beach was peaceful, an opportunity to reflect on everything that had happened and everything that was yet to come. Upon arriving at the beach house, I was greeted by the sound of the waves and the smell of salt that I loved so much. The window broken by Juliet had already been repaired, and the security company had installed cameras and alarms as requested. Despite that, upon entering, I could still feel the vestiges of the invasion, not on the walls or furniture, but in the energy of the place, in the subtle feeling of violation. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, organizing, reclaiming that space as mine. I put the children's drawings on the refrigerator, opened all the windows to let the sea air circulate, changed the sheets, and arranged my clothes in the closet Arthur and I used to share. In the evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the stars reflected in the ocean. The locket with Arthur's photo rested against my chest, a constant reminder of his love and foresight. "You were right all along, my love," I whispered to the starry sky. "About Juliet, about protecting what we built, about giving me the means to defend myself." A gentle breeze caressed my face, as if Arthur were responding from the afterlife. I closed my eyes and allowed, for the first time in a long time, the tears to flow freely, not just tears of sadness for the loss or the recent trauma, but also tears of relief, of liberation. Here, in this refuge by the sea, away from the chaos and painful memories, I could finally begin to heal. I could reconnect with the woman I was before this whole ordeal, the woman Arthur loved for almost 4 decades, the woman who had found the strength to face one of the greatest betrayals one could imagine. And as the waves rhythmically broke on the beach, carrying fragments of pain with each ebb, I began to glimpse a future different from the one I had imagined, but nonetheless full of possibilities. A future where I would not only be Arthur's widow or the grandmother relegated to a back room, but Helen, complete, resilient, mistress of her own story. 3 months passed since my arrival at the beach house. Autumn was beginning to give way to winter, bringing stronger winds and colder nights, but I had found a new rhythm, a new normalcy in this place that was now truly my home. Every morning I walked barefoot on the beach, feeling the cold sand between my toes and letting the occasional waves touch my feet. I had befriended other residents in the area, mainly retirees like me, people who understood the value of shared silence as we watched the sunrise. Michael and the children visited me every 2 weeks, bringing with them stories of a life that was slowly rebuilding. Dean was excelling in school, especially in math, while Jamie had discovered a passion for drawing that went far beyond childish scribbles. Michael, for his part, seemed more focused, more present as a father and as a son. "How are things going with the therapist?" I asked during one of those weekends as we prepared lunch together. "Surprisingly well," he replied, chopping vegetables with newly acquired precision. "Dr. Claudia says I'm making significant progress in recognizing patterns of codependency." I smiled, proud of his openness to seeking help. "And the children?" "Dean is handling it well. You know how resilient he is." Jamie still has occasional nightmares, but art therapy is helping a lot." He paused, hesitant. "Juliet requested supervised visits." My heart ached. Despite everything, she was still the mother of those children. "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," he admitted. "A part of me wants to protect them completely, but I know they need their mother, even with all her problems." He looked at me with inquisitive eyes. "What do you think?" "I think the children deserve the opportunity to maintain a relationship with their mother, always and when it is safe and healthy," I replied honestly. "Supervised visits seem like a good start." He nodded, relieved by my understanding. "The criminal case is still ongoing, but her lawyer secured an agreement for her to receive psychiatric treatment instead of serving a prison sentence. It's the best thing for everyone, especially for Dean and Jamie." That afternoon, while the children played on the beach under our watchful eyes, Michael handed me an envelope. "The divorce papers were finalized yesterday," he explained, "and we also managed to resolve most of the debts. Your loan, I don't know how to thank you, Mom." "It's not a loan, Michael. It's an investment in the children's future, in your future." I squeezed his hand. "Your father would have done the same." In the evening, after everyone went to sleep, I sat on the porch, as had become my ritual. The ocean was turbulent, reflecting my own thoughts. The journey of the last few months seemed almost surreal, from the humiliation of being relegated to a utility room to the empowerment of regaining control of my life. I remembered the day after Arthur's funeral, when Juliet threw my bags into the garage and declared that the house now belonged to her. At that moment, I felt so small, so defeated. Who could have imagined that that humiliation would be the catalyst for such a profound transformation? The next morning, I woke up to the sound of children's laughter. Dean and Jamie were on the beach with Michael, building an elaborate sandcastle. I watched them from the porch, my heart overflowing with a love that seemed almost painful in its intensity. "Grandma, come see our castle," Jamie shouted when she saw me, waving enthusiastically. I went down to the beach, feeling the sand gradually warm under my feet as the sun rose on the horizon. The castle was impressive. Towers, moats, even a makeshift drawbridge with sticks. "It's Grandma's house," Dean explained seriously, "but better because it has a protective dragon." He pointed to a sand formation that, with some imagination, could be interpreted as a dragon. "And who lives in this castle?" I asked, joining the game. "All of us," Jamie declared with conviction. "You, Dad, me, Dean, and Grandpa Arthur too, like a good ghost that protects us." Michael met my gaze over the children's heads, his eyes moist. "It's a beautiful idea, isn't it, Mom?" "All together, protected." I nodded, unable to trust my voice at that moment. The simplicity of Jamie's vision, our family united, even with its imperfections and absences, touched something deep within me. After lunch, while the children rested, Michael and I walked along the beach. The afternoon sun created golden reflections on the water, and seagulls flew lazily overhead. "I've been thinking," he said after a long, comfortable silence, "maybe we could sell the house in New York City." I looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure? You grew up in that house." "Yes, but there are too many difficult memories now, for me, for the children." He gently kicked a pebble in the sand. "I was thinking of buying something smaller, maybe closer to here." "The children love the sea, and being close to you." "I would love that," I replied sincerely, "but I don't want you to make that decision for me." "It's not just for you, Mom. It's for all of us." He smiled, a smile that so much resembled Arthur's that my heart ached. "I think we need a fresh start." That night, after Michael and the children left for the last flight back to New York City, the house became strangely silent. I had grown accustomed to the tranquility of my solitary routine, but after a weekend of laughter and conversations, their absence was almost physical. I sat on the sofa with a cup of tea, leafing through a photo album that Arthur had meticulously organized over the years. Our wedding, Michael's birth, family vacations, birthdays, graduations, a lifetime captured in images. When I reached the last pages, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small envelope glued to the back cover. Carefully, I took it out. The envelope contained a single folded piece of paper. My heart pounded as I opened it, recognizing Arthur's handwriting immediately. It was another letter, dated just 2 days before he passed. My dearest Helen, if you have found this, you have won. You have faced the trial and emerged victorious, just as I always knew you would. I wrote the other letter to give you the courage to seek out George Thompson. This one is for your heart. Juliet may have debts, but Michael also has a weakness that I could never fix entirely: his susceptibility to pressure and his reliance on others. He needs to stand on his own 2 feet now. You, my love, have earned your rest. Inside this envelope, you will find one more thing: the deed to a small property in upstate New York. It is a little cabin by a lake, a place where I plan to take you for quiet summers, away from the city's noise. It's nothing much, worth maybe $300,000 at most, but it's a sanctuary. I bought it and left it in my name specifically to be discovered later, as a final surprise for you to share with the children. The Children's Trust Fund is in place, and Michael's business is secure. Now it is time for you to live for yourself. Sell what you must, keep what you love. But please, Helen, go to the lake, watch the sunset, rest, and know that my love is always with you. With eternal love, Arthur. I sank back onto the sofa, the paper trembling in my hands. Arthur, my prudent, loving Arthur. Even in death, he was still taking care of me, not just financially, but emotionally. He gave me the strength to fight and the permission to rest. The envelope also contained the deed, a small cabin by a lake in the Catskills. I looked at the photograph of the children's sandcastle on the refrigerator. Everyone lives here, Jamie had said, and Grandpa Arthur too, like a good ghost that protects us. A profound sense of peace washed over me. I had regained control of my life, but more importantly, I had found my strength again. I had forgiven Michael and provided for my grandchildren. Now, it was time to follow Arthur's final instruction. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, walked over to the porch, and looked out at the vast, dark ocean. The battle was over, the game was won, and I was ready to go to the lake.